Thank you so much, Dr. Malusi, for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you making your time to actually come on this platform. And as we collaborate on this, continuous journey, I believe that this is going to be educational to most people, especially across the African continent. The topic that we're going to be discussing today is a very interesting topic. I want us to chat about the falling empires, or what we call the fall of America, as well as the geopolitics that is taking place around the world, Israel, Palestine, and how it actually links to the South African dynamics. If you don't mind, I know our last episode you introduced yourself, but if you don't mind, can you please reintroduce yourself for those who are coming across Dr. Malusi Mncube for the first time?
Greetings, my name is Dr. Malusi Mncube. My greetings extended to the global community, all humanity in Africa, all the continents of the world, United States of America, Japan, Russia, Asia, everywhere. I want to greet all the viewers and all the listeners and say, welcome.
Thank you so much, sir. There's a lot that is happening right now, especially with the elections that are going to be taking place on the 29th of May. A lot of people are really anxious. Some people are saying, what's really going to happen in South Africa after the elections? And I'm speaking because of our relations with other countries such as, America. It almost seems like, the change of power, which is likely to happen after the 29th of May, might actually, Helen Zille has spoken also about the economy losing confidence if, of course, political parties such as the EFF win. What is your view on that, and where do you think South Africa will be after the elections, particularly with their relationships with countries such as America?
To begin with, I would like to say greetings to all South Africans, and to all South Africans, this is my response to you, particularly the black majority, because we have the short end of the stick, right from the first days when we were colonized right up to now. We were played in 1994 right up to now. What I can tell you definitively is that expect the unexpected at all times. We are living in a world where we are interconnected, but we are interconnected and interdependent in a very lopsided way. We have forces and powers that want to keep us subjugated. Why am I saying that? And without being alarmist, look all around you what is happening in the world. Number one, look at what is happening in the DRC. People, hundreds and thousands of people being moved from their customary areas, where traditional areas. Look at what is happening in Sudan. Look at what is happening in Ethiopia. Look at what is happening in Cabo Delgado. Look at what is happening in Palestine, Gaza, Rafah. Rafah has from today or from yesterday been attacked. Look exactly what is happening all over this world. So these are signs of the times. There is no exception. And this is all against the background of a falling Western empire. So young South Africans, black majority South Africans, even after the elections, expect the unexpected. So if people in Gaza are being annihilated, if they're genocidally being annihilated, anything can happen in South Africa. Anything can happen elsewhere in the world. So let's not rest on our laurels. Let's be prepared at all times, maximum vigilance.
I'm speaking about this because we know, obviously, what happens when countries such as America puts you under sanctions. There's a gentleman by the name of Rutendo Matinyarare who has been fighting Zimbabwe's sanctions, for almost a decade now. And recently I see that he's been cancelled on a lot of media platforms. And my concern is that we've got a lot of guys in South Africa that are creating content such as myself right now, and we're still wondering, it's a moment of uncertainty. We're still wondering whether or not, things like this, freedom of speech will still be allowed, after the elections. And I'm not speaking specifically, being denied freedom of speech by the South African government. But like, the media platforms that we are using, I mean, we are broadcasting right now on YouTube. YouTube is a Google company. Google is an American company. And I'm also thinking about what might happen if those sanctions are actually, placed in South Africa.
One thing you must know, freedom of expression and associations, those are not given human rights. Those are inalienable rights. They are born within you. You do not have to wait for a certain government. I do not care whether that government is a black or a white government. It's up to you, especially when you've had the chance to be educated, to express that right. Meaning that even if you have to sacrifice your life to express that, because that's the type of situation, that's the type of political economy that is unfolding in the world. Do you have to die for your beliefs? If you're not prepared to do that, then yes, they will gag you. Then that's up to you if you want to be gagged. So don't wait for someone to give you your rights. Your rights are inalienable. They are yours. It's yours to stand up for those rights and exercise those rights.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you think they are actually gonna place sanctions on us if, of course, there is a change of power?
I think sanctions were already placed on us by placing them on Zimbabwe. Look, Zimbabwe is not the new child on the block on whom sanctions were placed. The United States, the G7, the whole of the G7, they are imperial powers. They are world empires who are being led by the United States of America. So it's part of their modus operandi to put across sanctions to keep you in control. They do that all the time. I can give you examples. For instance, they've got sanctions on Cuba. They put sanctions on Venezuela. They've got sanctions on Iran. I can go on and on and on. Their modus operandi. If you do not do as they tell you, they will put sanctions on you. So sanctions basically on Zimbabwe, they were not necessarily only on Zimbabwe. Actually, it was heralding and a warning to South Africa. Should you go the direction of Zimbabwe, these sanctions are actually a warning on you. So that's why, to a greater extent, our South African leadership, they were towing to a great extent the neoliberal political outline as dictated by the Washington consensus, which is the American consensus. So we haven't deviated much from that. Hence, there's still no sanctions on South Africa as such. So they're not just meant for Zimbabwe, those sanctions. They're not just for Zimbabwe. They are actually meant for the whole of Africa, and much more specifically for South Africa, because in the whole of Africa, South Africa is the most industrialized country in Africa. There's no country in Africa that is as industrialized as South Africa.
Now those are news to my ears, because like, when you look at the news, you almost see obviously the type of content that has been portrayed with regards to other African countries. It's a negative content, but then you've got countries such as your Kenya, who are developing and all of that. And in my view, I thought maybe like those are the countries that somehow are following South Africa's footsteps in terms of industrialization. What is your view on that?
You've given Kenya as a case study example.
Yes.
I can pick up any other African country here in Africa. Non-African country, economically, we can look at all the economic indicators. Now, first thing you must keep in your mind, you must look at the financial architecture of the whole world. The financial architecture of the whole world is dominated by the G7 or the Western countries. They dominate that. So anything else that happens, it has the backdrop of the financial architecture dominated by the Western world, and primarily by the US, through its military, through its politics, through its economics, and through its currency. So Kenya is far, far away from being, from benefiting the Kenyan people. Kenya is there to benefit primarily the Western world, and also it benefits its caretakers, what they call a neo-patrimonial states. It benefits the selling out leadership. Africa is full of sellout leadership. They are in a comfortable position. like we had right now in Senegal, Sal, he's no more there, right? It was benefiting only the elite at the expense of the majority. So there is nothing like the economies were totally structurally overhauled to benefit the majority of the people, because when you have to do that, then structurally it means the productive sectors. And what do I mean by productive sectors? Means that all the investment has to go into the productive sectors of that country. For instance, in South Africa or in Kenya or in Morocco, it has to go into mining, it has to go into agriculture, it has to go into fisheries, it has to go into manufacturing sector, it has to go into value addition, it has to go into beneficiation, it has to go into creating regional value chains in Africa that can compete with Western-dominated global value chains. I'm talking about the intellectual property, I'm talking about the processes, I'm talking about the tariffs, etc. We are far away from that. All those areas are dominated by the Western world. So be very careful, Mr. Elvis, when you tell me that Kenya it's progressing. It's not progressing at all. If you go, a whole lot of Kenyan live in what you call in poverty. They live in ghettos, and even most of their land is still owned, as in South Africa, as in Zimbabwe, it is owned by multinational corporations. That's what is happening.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Last time I asked you this question, but I would love for you to extend on it, because you remember last time we didn't have enough time, so a lot of things we really missed, right? But the question I also wanted to ask you, and I think it's in relation with also the current status quo, with what's happening in the news in relation to Palestine, Gaza, Israel, and now emerging so-called potential war between Iraq and Israel. What do you think? How much power do you think institutions such as the ICC, ICJ do actually have in prosecuting some of the crimes, or what they deem to be crimes against humanity, or whatever form of crime that is within their jurisdiction? How much power do you think they have, and how much impact do you think they can have if they say, you know what, here is a warrant of arrest, or here is whatever that needs to be executed?
What you must understand, after the Second World War, when Nazism was defeated, I would conclude Nazism was not defeated. It resurfaced because a lot of Nazis, their scientists and their intellectuals, some of them went into Ukraine, a lot of them went into Europe, went into Argentina, and a whole lot of them went into the machinery of the United States of America. Yes, I'm talking of your scientists, your rich ones, the brains behind Nazism. So Nazism was never obliterated. No, it metamorphosized into another form. Hence, we have the situation that we have. But let's look at what happened after 1945. Institutions that were carved up, they suited the agenda. They were made in the image of the United States of America and the Western countries. So those are the people with the power. United States having the most powerful then, and it's now arguable now, the most powerful military in the world, number one. They made sure they dominated any other institutions, be they the United Nations, be it World Bank, be it International Monetary Fund, or other international financial institutions. They dominated that. So they call the shots. Whoever they want to see as the General Secretary of the United Nations, as the Director of IMF or World Bank. So even with the IMF, even with the International Criminal Court, as much as America is not a member, they're not signatory to that, but they still call the shots, whereby when America was involved in the war in Afghanistan, the ICC wanted...
America is not part of ICC?
No, they're not. They're not signatory. They refuse to be signatory. They're not.
Okay.
Yes. But because of their power, I've just explained to you their institutional power, their global power, they can actually force other countries to be indicted within the International Criminal Court, as much as they are not members of the ICC. So you can see the type of power that America has. They can do that. So that's why you see they were forcing a lot of African leaders to be indicted within the International Criminal Court. And there was a chorus of African leaders now saying, this is selective, biased, racist type of justice. It only targets African leaders. And that's what they were doing to put African leaders in line so that their political economy follows the dictates of the Washington Consensus. So basically, that is what was happening. So back to the ICC, when America was in Afghanistan, right, before they were kicked out of Afghanistan and before Donald Trump took over, the ICC wanted to investigate horrible crimes against humanity, genocidal crimes against humanity in Afghanistan by the American troops. President Donald Trump stopped that. The Americans stopped that. So there's nothing the ICC could do. So the ICC, it's actually a toothless bulldog. It's definitely, it is only a lapdog that is used to whip mostly African nations into lines. When it wants to bring justice to the first world, your G7 countries and primarily the United States of America, it cannot do that. They are told this is above your pay grade. You will not do that, and they cannot do that. Right now, ICC has threatened, I think for the past week right up to today, they've threatened that they are going to bring an indictment against Netanyahu of Israel and his whole leadership and all that.
Yeah.
The American government has issued a warning that you do that, we will close the ICC, its prosecutors and everything in The Hague. We will make sure we close it. Now, how do you make such a statement? Because the ICC and the ICJ, both those courts, as much as they're different, one is part of the United Nations, which is the ICJ and the ICC. They are in Netherlands, and you make a statement as Americans which overrides another country's sovereignty. But they made that statement. You will not issue that warrant of arrest just as much as they issued it for President Putin of Russia. So clearly, we can see the duplicity, we can see the double standards, and we can see who has the power and who calls the power. So it's like, do as we tell you to do, but don't do as we do. It's either you are with us or you are against us. So there's no democracy there. It's what other people, they call might is right. So the American government, the Western government really believes in that adage that might is right. That if I can kick you, you will listen to what I'm telling you. Don't have to watch what I do. You do what I'm telling you to do. And that's exactly what is happening. So up to now, the ICC, it's only threatening, as far as I know up to today, it's only threatening they are going to issue a warrant of arrest. Because clearly what is happening in Palestine, it is a genocide. South Africa did put a case to the International Criminal Court, which is part of the United Nations, that is definitely a genocide that is going on here. But the Americans are protecting Israel because I would argue Israel is an extension of America, or I would say it's a nickname of America, to put it lightly in that way. America is Israel in the Middle East, where greater part of the energy of the oil comes from. So I do not think they want to get out of that area. They are staying in that area by hook or crook. They are not going anywhere.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And what do you say about the relationship between the U.S. and what is it? The other country, is it Iran, the country that is potentially going to get into war with Israel?
Well, what has happened of late? Israel has not wanted Iran to develop its own nuclear deterrent. Okay. In other words, Israel wants to be the only country in the Middle East to be a nuclear power. They want
Sounds
to be
like the USA.
Yes, they are the USA.
Yeah,
they want to be the only power. Now, I would like to believe Iran has managed to develop a serious military capability and a deterrent that now has changed the balance of power, the power balance of power has demonstrably been changed. Why do I say that recently? What has happened recently is Iran fired a couple of hundreds or thousands of missiles, and these were not like your supersonic, just to show Israel that we can touch you. We are no more the Iran you think you used to be, because Israel used to have a policy of killing and assassinating the scientists of Iran. But Iran recently, it's about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, they shot a whole lot of drones, a whole lot of missiles, but these were not even your state of the art, just to show that we can penetrate your most advanced protected air defense in the world. Yes, in the world. And they managed to. And they managed to get into Israel. And that is a message they were showing Israel, and they were showing America that the monopoly, the hegemony of deterrence is no more in the hands of the Americans or of the Israelis. We, as Iranians, we have that capability. But in return, also, what Israel did, I forgot the name of the town, they also sent jet fighters and they bombed a nuclear area. I think they were just trying to show we can also touch you, Iran. Out of, it was symbolic, just to show that we also have that capability. But the point of the matter, my analysis, that Iran was showing Israel that you cannot touch us and think you can get away with it. If you think you can destroy us, we can equally flatten Israel. And why there hasn't been any move right up to now from Israel part or from the America's part is because I believe there's a limit to every power. I don't think Israel or America can overstretch themselves, because I think they've already overstretched themselves given Ukraine in other areas. So I think right now they are very, very careful if they have to broaden the war and bring in Iran into this whole thing. So I think the Americans are treading very carefully, also given that their economy is not doing very well. There's not only the conventional economics, but the economy of armaments, of the military, because if America has to go the way with Israel of involving themselves in a war with Iran, I wonder whether they do have the logistics, the ammunition to be able to take on Iran and be able to run other theaters of war all over the world. I doubt. So I think that's why they've cooled down a little bit. For me, that's a demonstration that there is a limitation of power. There is, I think, also Israel is declining, and America, its power is declining. We do not have a shock and awe like they arrogantly applied when they attacked Saddam Hussein in 2003, when we had one of their top politicians, people like Donald Rumsfeld, saying, shock and awe, we're going to get, and they killed over 1 million civilians in Iraq. That's a story that still the world has to know about that. These are some of the criminal investigations that must be done, and they must not be let to go under the carpet. So yes, America is not infallible, neither is Israel. They are also operating within their budget of capabilities, budget of time, budget of resources, and budget of skill set, whatever they can do at that point in time. So that is my analysis, and that's how I see it. They cannot just go foolhardy. It doesn't work like that anymore. Yeah, there's other players now.
Because I can imagine, I mean, they just came back from, or I don't know if it's still happening with the Ukraine thing, you know, because they supplied Ukraine with a lot of ammunition and weapons. So if they're going to do that again with Israel, which they have done, obviously now that they've been destroying Palestine, if they're going to start another war with another country, then it's just going to spiral, and it's just going to end up being a world war. Do you think America is part of, is at a stage where we might confidently say it's a falling empire? Because obviously America has been a superpower for, it still is, still powerful, I mean, we utilize almost all American resources in our daily lives. But like, do you think it is at a stage where things are getting out of control? They are losing power.
There's many indicators. There's many indicators soberly. When you study those indicators, they're very simple indicators. When you look at those indicators, they clearly show that America is declining. As much as they are a superpower, but they're not the only superpower in the crawl. They're not the only bull. There's other superpowers. So once there's other superpowers, it's not unlike when after Second World War they bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima by setting nuclear bombs in Japan to demonstrate everybody else, to Russia and everybody else, we are the big bosses in the new block, and you will listen as we say things have changed. And for China to have the market share of the world, to be the biggest manufacturer of almost all goods and services in the world, even those that serve the United States, because they are still trading partners as much as they are enemies. They are still trading partners, America and China right now.
Yeah.
Now, that market share, and America they were hoping to destroy the Russian state, which they've dismally failed. They've actually strengthened Russia because they wanted to take the resources of Russia. Russia has very outstanding resources, your gas, your oil, and other resources that the Americans wanted to get hold of, and they wanted to break up that state. They failed. Russia has actually become very powerful, and they've actually pushed Russia to have a symbiotic relationship with China, which has become a very, very threatening bulwark against the Western world. And of course, now we speak of BRICS. So when you look at economic indicators, those indicators, as much as America has nuclear weapons, etc., and all that, right? And nuclear war is a war that nobody can win. The Russians can't win it, Americans can't win it, the Chinese cannot win it. But the Americans cannot go into China, cannot go into Russia, like they did in Panama, like they did in Libya.
And why
like
is
that? Because of the weapons Russia and China have, the capability they have.
Yeah.
Right now, the whole of NATO, they were supporting Ukraine with all those billions that have gone to waste, right? They've sacrificed. Can you imagine? There's over 20 million Ukrainians that are refugees from their countries. That's sacrifice. Now, can you imagine how many Ukrainians, civilians have died? We can never know the true numbers. And I would like to argue that it goes into millions. All right? They have failed to destroy NATO, which is the bulwark of Europe, the military bulwark of Europe and the United States. They have failed through their proxy war to destroy Russia. Russia. So it tells you, for those, I'm not a militarist, but for those who are schooled in the military and all that, it tells you about Russia's military science and Russia's military capability and its modern military execution and how it executes it. When you have common sense, you can begin to tell that Russia is very advanced, much more advanced than NATO. They are not capable. It even tells you, when you use your common sense, as much as I'm not a military person, it tells you Russia's military machinery, for them to be able to churn up and to produce ammunition that was challenging the might of NATO in Ukraine. It tells you that Russia is very sophisticated. And I think Russia, they were even fighting that war, they were using a velvet glove. And I don't think they were being as hardcore when they were when they were repelling the Nazis in 1945. Remember what Stalin did. Stalin saved the day against the Nazis. Russia lost over, I think, 20 million Russian fighters. They lost in the Second World War. They are the ones actually who stopped the Nazis. So I would like to believe Putin, my analysis, I would like to believe Putin is using a velvet glove in terms of fighting Ukraine, because a lot of Ukrainian soldiers now, they are demotivated, they are surrendering, and Russia has actually welcomed them and said, you don't have to die, because some of these Ukrainians, remember, Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union, right? Russia has said, there's no need for you to die, because it's useless. You are going to die. Surrender will give you food, medication, and thousands of Ukrainians are surrendering every day to the Russian forces, right? So, but you can imagine Russia or Putin, they haven't gone on a full onslaught. They are using a velvet glove type of strategy, but they've managed still to beat NATO, meaning that NATO itself, its capabilities have been found wanting. They are not as capable as they want to make us for us to think they are. Because at the end of the day, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. You can tell us you are a man of muscles and this and that, but when it comes into the ring, into the boxing, you can't even last 3 rounds. Wow. So there is a whole lot that is wanting about the American military, right? About NATO's military. Because also it's not the military warfare is not only won just through total vanquishment, but you also win it politically. If you look at America politically, a whole lot of students are across whole America, politically they are against this war in Ukraine, number one. They are against what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing in there. So you cannot fight and win your war if your intelligentsia, all the students, most of the students in America and most of civil society is beginning to be galvanized, and they are going against you in the United States, because then you are losing the political fight, you are losing the narrative, because you need that to be able to win the military, because people in America are questioning, because the last tranche of money they sent to Ukraine was 61 billion, and Americans, ordinary Americans, are up in arms. They're saying we have no jobs, our economy is down, it's not competitive, it's not as good as the Chinese economy, and all that. We will not accept this nonsense, and it's an election year in America. So there's so much pressure on the American government itself. I do not see how they can win the war. The war which they are winning is just benefiting the super rich, not even ordinary middle class Americans. I would like to argue that the American middle class now, it's no more entrenched, it's no more edified as it is supposed to be edified. So America is weak, so to speak, and also given the type of debt that they have right now of about 35 trillion. So America is definitely declining on all those fronts.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Do you think the decline of America is a positive or negative thing? Because like in South Africa, we hear a lot about. I mean, I was telling you about the interview of Helen Zille when she said on David Mashabela podcast that if political parties such as the EFF win and get into power, economy will lose confidence. And I'm glad David actually asked him, who is the economy, and she confidently said, you know what, the economy are the people that are actually driving this country. She really said it like that. And for me, I think a lot of people have been questioning in South Africa that should we vote for the EFF, because the EFF is advocating for the land appropriation without compensation, and that will chase away the white people who end up like Zimbabwe, whatever. So do you think then the fall of America as an empire that has been dominant for years is a negative or positive thing across the world, globally?
To begin with, I don't even want to use the word negative. I want to use a declining America. It's very dangerous for the world. That's what's happening.
It's very dangerous.
It's very dangerous because they're even beginning to show their true colors.
Okay.
Right.
In what sense?
For instance, they've maintained sanctions on Cuba, sanctions on Zimbabwe, and they've made you can hear some of the statements when they said we supplied Russia with arms during that time that go to Ukraine, and we put a commission of inquiry to investigate that and to prove that that was a lie and all that. So it means a declining America will go to any lengths. They actually do not care. Like I said to you, they believe might is right. And what Helen Zille is saying and all that, as far as I'm concerned, Mina, it's racist. When you talk about the economy, won't have confidence if EFF talks. Who's supposed to benefit from that economy? I think I prefaced my answering to your questions about the black majority, right? If the black majority doesn't benefit, then who's benefiting, right? It means the architects of apartheid are still benefiting. And we know who the architects of apartheid are in South Africa and globally, right? The people who created what we call white supremacy, white privilege. And they cannot continue to benefit at the expense of the black majority. Now we do have a very few black elite who are benefiting, right? What Malcolm X used to call them house Negroes, you know, the ones who'll say, I'm answering to what you're saying, Master, are we sick? Master, don't you think it's time to go in and to go into bed? Master, must I get you a tablet and all that? But the real black people who are catching hell, right, in the plantation fields. Now, this is what the EFF represents, and this is what the MK party wants to say, no, our people must benefit. So what Zilla is talking about to say there won't be confidence in the economy, meaning that the architects of apartheid, the beneficiaries of apartheid will not benefit and they will pull off the money. Of course, yes, they will pull off the money. At what point in time, we, the black majority, are we going to benefit? When are we going to have free education? When are we going to have free health care? When are we going to have jobs, not a financialized economy, but investments that are put into the productive sector of the economy that benefits, that are labor intensive. There's no use choosing automated economy that only benefits the very few, the architects of apartheid, and doesn't benefit the majority of our people. So those blacks, if there are blacks who say, don't vote for EFF and MK because there won't be confidence by investors, unless you are saying you are a house Negro and you just want to benefit you and your master. Tina, we want a total overhaul. And that is what MK is saying. That's what PAC is saying. That's what Azapo is saying. We want a total overhaul of the economy to benefit the black people. At some point in time, we cannot dodge that bullet. We cannot keep on dodging it forever. That's what happened in Zimbabwe, right? We can dodge it as far as possible. And in that dodging, there's certain black people here in South Africa who are benefiting to such an extent that we cannot even now pay NEFSA's education money for our children. They are even prepared to do that, to sell out their own children's education. So we cannot have that. So all I'm saying to the black majority South African, we cannot keep on dodging this forever. What do you say about Ukrainians, 20 million who are in exile, and millions who have died in Ukraine? They've already lost out in that war in Ukraine. That goes to show you. And basically also what's happening in Ukraine, what people must understand, there's a lot of investors who've bought land into Ukraine. And Ukraine has certain resources, rare earth resources, and it has certain agricultural land. People like BlackRock, they've invested, they've bought that. By the time the Ukrainians want to be able to reclaim their land and all that, because Ukraine has been put in so much debt. All these billions that are being put onto Ukraine, it's all debt. And it's not money for nothing. The Americans will want their money back. And they're putting Ukraine into a forever debt system. Right? So there is no way the Ukrainians, even if there's peace, they are going to have a chance. Ukrainian is going to be owned totally by the Americans, by the oligarch of the West. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malusi. I really appreciate your analysis and your insights. This is really interesting, and I think a lot of people will actually appreciate, learning from you and learning from, the information that you are actually, putting out there right now.
We learn from each other.
Yeah, 100%.
We learn from each other.
Yeah. So just in closing, we're living in interesting times, and I think I've got a lot of questions, but as you know, we're going to have other sessions where we break down a whole lot of things, if of course we miss them here in this episode. The last question I just wanted to ask is, South Africa is one of the countries that America has invested in. If you look at a lot of corporations um, that are in South Africa, are American corporations. I mean, recently, yesterday, I was watching the news. Amazon just launched their their headquarters, their headquarters in South Africa, in Cape Town, right? Um, don't you think that America, this is the last question, obviously, as we close, don't you think that if America, when America puts those kind of sanctions, then they lose because there's a lot of investment that they have made in the country. And so while they want to win the war politically, economically, it can come back and bite them, in a sense.
Well, it's what they call a calculated risk.
Okay.
You know, when you go into business, sometimes I'll just give you a situation. You can say, just for us to have an entry level, a footing into a certain type of market, for they call it a loss leader strategy. For the first 3 years, we could be making a loss. So you could be selling actually your products or your services at a loss, so that you brand yourself within that particular market or that particular country. They call it a loss leader strategy. As you brand yourself, you know thereafter, meaning that you have that type of money to, if you want to call it waste, but to them it's not wasting. You have that type of money to waste, or but you are investing that type of money. But you know, once you have your foothold in that market, that is legally, in terms of its market segments, and in terms of you understand how that market operates, and you solidify and edify yourself in that market. After 3 years, you know that you start calling the shots. Then they are not making a little. So I'm not surprised.
Sacrifice.
Yes. So I'm not surprised if you say Amazon has opened up a head office in what you call
In Cape Town.
in Cape Town.
Yeah.
For instance, I'm talking to you about a whole lot of Americans who are complaining about a whole billions of dollars that are going into war in Ukraine. But as far as the super rich of America, it's not a loss for them, because there is a return on investment, because the true Americans, according to me, the true investors is the super elite, not just your rich Americans, your ordinary Americans. Yes, those are catching hell, but those are what they call collateral damage. They don't care about them. But the lifestyle of the super rich Americans, yes, I can assure you, they are benefiting from that war in Ukraine, because all those investments they're giving to Ukraine, because they do those investments because they prop up the logistics and the military manufacturing of the Americans, which benefits the military industrial complex of America. So the super rich in America are earning. So they couldn't care less about ordinary Americans, or just your merely rich Americans. But the super rich Americans, they're not threatened at all. They still have their lifestyles. Their children have their lifestyles. They live their lifestyle. So when you might interpret it as a loss, but to them it's not a loss. It's an investment. Absolutely. But quickly, I also want to say to South Africans, expect the unexpected. Anything can happen after the elections. And don't think, given the global climate, now you can see clearly what is happening in the DRC, Sudan, everywhere. South Africa, you mustn't think just because whoever wins the elections after the 2019, you're going to sit down. Things are getting dangerous globally, and they're getting dangerous, will get dangerous in South Africa. If you, South Africans, don't stand up and fight for what you want, you will be taken advantage of. Things are going to get bad. Like I said in all my podcasts with you, South African economy is not growing. So there's going to be a greater number of unemployed people. But the lifestyle of Zille and the lifestyle of the ordinary South Africans who stay in squatter camps is not the same, right? Zille's lifestyle and ordinary black majority's lifestyle is not the same. There is tremendous inequality there, right? So Zille, even post 29th elections, she'll still lead her lifestyle. But what happens to our people whom the EFF, whom MK, whom AZAPO, whom PAC is trying to uplift. We're being told, don't uplift those people. So those people who are down, our black majority brothers, you better stand up. You better stand up, and not stand up once every 3 months. Even after elections, you stand up every day. They must know that they are dealing with a serious breed of Africans. We will not take this nonsense anymore. No more. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.